Welcome back to Hannity. So things got pretty testy yesterday during Donald Trump's press conference in Iowa last night. Univision's Jorge Ramos started shouting at Republican frontrunner Donald Trump. Then he got escorted out of the room. Watch this.
Okay, who's next? Yeah, please.
Mr. Trump, I have a question.
Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down.
No.
Sit down.
No,
Sit down.
an immigrant.
Go ahead.
I have the right to ask the question.
No, you don't. You haven't been called.
I have the right to ask the question.
Go back to Univision. Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million.
Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million people. You cannot build a 1900
Go ahead.
wall. You cannot deny citizenship to children.
Sit down, please.
Idea.
You weren't called.
I'm a reporter and don't touch me, sir. Don't touch
Go.
me, sir. You cannot touch me. I have the right to ask a question.
Now, Donald Trump eventually let Jorge Ramos back into the room in the presser and allowed him to ask a question, which ultimately led to even more sparring.
Here's what we're going to do. Ready? Okay.
Are you going to bring the army?
No. Let me tell you. We're going to do it in a very humane fashion. Believe me, I have a bigger heart than you do. The one thing we're going to start with immediately are the gangs and the real bad ones. And you do agree there are some bad ones. Do you agree with that, or do you think everyone's just perfect? No. I'd ask you a question. Do you agree with that? We have tremendous crime. We have tremendous problems. I can't deal with this.
All right, here now with reaction, author of a brand new New York Times #1 bestseller. Now for the last 3 weeks, Plunder and Deceit, Big Government's Exploitation of Young People in the Future. I call him the great one, Mark Levin. You know, a couple of things. Jorge Ramos is an advocate. He's not a journalist, as he claims. He's not a reporter, as he claims. He doesn't have a right to ask a question and disrupt a press conference the way he did. Donald Trump graciously allowed him to have this exchange with him, and Donald Trump mopped the floor with him. At least that was my perception. What's yours?
Well, your perception's exactly right. I was very proud of what Donald Trump did. Jorge Ramos is a bully, and Jorge Ramos tries to control events. Jorge Ramos jumped the line there. It wasn't his turn to ask questions, and he would have been able to ask questions. But look, Ramos is a fanatic. He's obnoxious. He's a pretend journalist. He's running around today saying that he's defending the First Amendment. Really? Since when are hecklers defending the First Amendment? He's got an agenda, and he advances it. You know, Sean, I did a little checking. About 3 years ago, he was named one of the 100 biggest leaders or movers by Time magazine, and he wrote about himself, and he said, among other things, "But I've never ceased to be Mexican. I have 2 passports, and I vote in elections in both countries. I'm deeply proud of this privileged duality. The best thing about America is its embrace of diversity." No, the best thing about America is America, Mr. Ramos. Now, America's immigration system isn't the problem. Mexico's immigration system is the problem. Latin America's immigration system is the problem. Their governments are the problem. Why are they exporting their next generation into America, Mr. Ramos? And you're proud of your duality and your diversity. Why is it that you're not spending time in Mexico? Have you ever read their immigration laws? Have you ever read its constitution? If the United States of America took Mexico's immigration laws and stamped America's immigration laws on it, then you would see oppression and repression and disaster and calamity. Mr. Ramos is taking advantage of this country, and I notice not in any of his questions to Donald Trump did he ask about the effects of illegal immigration on American citizens. They never call our children dreamers. Mr. Ramos is a balkanizer. He's a racialist. He's gotten very rich doing it. But he has nothing to do with, as far as I'm concerned, what's good going forward for this country.
You know, you keep watching this Trump phenomenon, Mark, and in this instance, I thought he showed that he was tough. He stood his ground. He made intelligent arguments. He was patient. And at the end of the day, he came out on top. Is there something some other candidates can learn from Trump and his aggressiveness and his no-holds-barred style?
Absolutely. Talk like a regular person. Americans like it. That's number one. Number two, use common sense. He's got a lot of it. Number three, don't allow people to abuse you and smear you and project their agenda onto you. That was Trump's press conference. That was not Mr. Ramos's press conference. The American people want to see somebody fight back. We've been kicked around too long. That's why Lindsey Graham is going nowhere. Lindsey Graham is a weasel, in my humble opinion. He's out there attacking Trump. He doesn't address these front groups that are pushing their agenda. He doesn't talk about Obama the way he talks about Trump. I'm not endorsing anybody, as you well know. But the fact of the matter is, I like the way this guy talks.
You know, it's interesting to me, and here's my prediction. I think the so-called establishment, I think they're going to eventually rally around one establishment candidate and hope that the conservative voters splinter off into different candidates. And ultimately, they will plot, they will plan, they will scheme to destroy the conservative in this race. Now, we could look at Thad Cochran and that whole issue that took place in Mississippi. You had leaders of the House and Senate bragging about the 2014 elections and how they beat the Tea Party. Who do you think wins this battle in the end?
Well, we better win the battle, or we're going to lose the country. The Republican establishment, other than 2 terms of Ronald Reagan, has had its way with the Republican Party. Look, the Republican Party, I'm a member, it doesn't represent me. I don't know what it represents. It doesn't know what it represents. Look, a few years ago, we had another guy stand up who was courageous, who was fresh. Ted Cruz in the United States Senate 2 years ago. He said, okay, we campaigned to defund Obamacare, then let's do it. And what happened? He was slammed, he was smeared by the Republican establishment, by so-called leaders in Congress, by their surrogates in the media. If it wasn't Trump, it would be Cruz they attacked. If it wasn't Cruz, it would be Walker. It would be somebody else. We know who they want. And the guy that they want is not the guy that's going to be the person who I think can get elected president of the United States. He doesn't even act like Jeb, like he wants to be president. He seems to go through the motions. He talks into his chest. I don't know where the guy is going.
So you got Trump, you got Cruz, you got Walker, you have Ben Carson, 4 insurgent candidates that are doing pretty well by every objective standard if you put their numbers together. So what is the strategy that'll be employed by the big money, for example, that part of the Republican Party that doesn't want to build the wall because they want cheap labor? So what is their strategy to defeat the insurgency?
By the way, you know, it's amazing to me. Barack Obama goes on, he comes into the presidency, he talks about, these jobs he's going to create and infrastructure, and they blow $800 billion. We have nothing to show for it. So now we want to build a wall on the southern border to protect America's sovereignty, to protect us from drug cartels, to protect us from terrorists and so forth, so we can actually manage a legal immigration system. And what do they say? It's too expensive. It's too complicated. The American people are sick of this. As for the Republican establishment, I detest them more than I detest the Democrats, and I'm going to tell you why. If they had had their way, Ronald Reagan would never have been president. He would never have had a chance to win 2 massive landslides. We have got to bust through this Republican establishment, their donors, their consultants, their media surrogates. We're going to have to bust through them to give people an opportunity to actually vote for a conservative for president of the United States. And if you're under 45, I've said this many times, you've never had the chance. It's inspiring. It's invigorating. It's exciting. We need to have the difference between a conservative, a principled, articulate conservative, and one of the left-wing kooks who's running in the Democrat Party.
Let me go back to the immigration debate, and this came up between Jorge Ramos and Trump last night, and that is the 14th Amendment. We had you on last week. You talked about the author of the 14th Amendment. Every year, between 350,000 and 400,000 children are born to illegal alien mothers residing in the U.S. Of that number, 71% of these households with children receive some sort of government welfare, compared with 39% of households consisting of native-born Americans. So my question to you is, all these people that are on television saying that the 14th Amendment, that you can't do anything. If you're born in America, even though your mother's not a citizen, the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship. Your answer is?
Show me one participant in writing the 14th Amendment who took that position. In fact, the primary author took the opposite position. No foreigners and no aliens. That's number one. Number two, show me one delegate to any state convention ratifying the 14th Amendment that said that. They can't find one.
Article
then
1,
they
Section 8.
act like liberals pouring through Supreme Court cases. What's that?
And don't forget Article 1, Section 8. Congress has the authority to make laws regarding immigration.
Well, not only that, I think now Barack Obama has shown the next conservative president the way. They can get up and say, you know what, I found Barack Obama's pen in my desk and his phone, And since the Supreme Court, Anthony Kennedy, 5-4, has ruled that the president has this broad discretionary power when it comes to immigration, and Barack Obama exercised it, and he had editorial page after editorial page, and Jorge Ramos praising him, okay. I've got a pen and I've got a phone, and now I've decided under the 14th Amendment we're going to read it the way it reads, and we're going to say no birthright citizenship for illegal aliens.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Number one, plunder and deceit on the New York Times bestseller list. Thank you, Mark.